Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod, the health of healthcare. The head of the FDA, Dr. Marty Makary, joins us. Drug safety, innovations, and yes, vaccines.
The best way to prevent measles is through vaccination.
Do tariffs impact travel? Booking.com CEO Glenn Fogel on consumer choice and the geopolitical baggage.
We see Canada, U.S. way down, but Canadians are still traveling. We see them going to Mexico.
Plus, the latest on a tragic Midtown Manhattan shooting, the tsunami warnings in Paradise, and Eamon Javers wraps the U.S.-China trade talks led by the Treasury Secretary.
The rhythm and tone of the negotiations is good. They're beginning to find a rapport with the Chinese side.
But will we get the deals we want? It's an age-old question.
That's one of the great questions, chicken and an egg. As far as I know, it still has not. We don't know. We may never know which came first.
It's Wednesday, July 30th, 2025. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Meantime, investigators are looking into why the suspect in Monday evening's Midtown Manhattan shooting targeted the building at 345 Park Avenue. Authorities say security video shows 27-year-old Shane Devon Tamaru of Las Vegas getting out of a double-parked car carrying what police described as a AR-15 style assault rifle. Officials familiar with the investigation telling NBC News that he left a note suggesting his mental illness may be linked to CTE from having played football. The NFL is one of the tenants of the Park Avenue building. Law enforcement authorities in Nevada say that he had 2 mental health incidents in roughly the last 3 years. Also learning more about the victims of the shooting. Blackstone identified 43-year-old Wesley LaPartner. She was a senior managing director and a member of Blackstone's real estate investment committee. Also, 36-year-old Didarul Islam was the police officer who had been with the NYPD for almost 4 years. He was working off duty as a security guard at the time of the shooting. And 46-year-old Alan Atteen was a security officer who was also killed. His labor union remembered him as a New York hero. And Julia Hyman was identified as the 4th victim by the New York City Chief Medical Examiner's Office. She was an associate at Rudin Management, which owns and has offices in that building. They own that building. She was a first year, by the way, a Cornell grad. And the whole thing is just so tragic. I know so many people. It's like 1 degree of separation with all of these people in so many ways. A very close friend. Who happened to be very close with the Blackstone executive, Josh Kushner, who, by the way, worked with her. It was worked with her when he was an associate at Goldman Sachs. You could go down the list. So this, for those on Wall Street, this I think touches a lot of folks. I would also say, from a security perspective, I don't know how many people you spoke with yesterday, but I would say most business leaders were huddling with their own security teams trying to figure out, okay, do you harden the buildings? What do you do? Do you have to change your whole thing? And are we now into a whole new place? And I don't know if we are in a different place between what happened last year and what happened now. I think a lot of people...
Last year with United Health.
With United Health. Yeah. I think a lot of people used to say, CEOs and others would have security, and some people said, oh, do they really need the security? They would say, do they need the security? Maybe they do, and maybe it's different.
The Department of Health and Human Services says that the FDA's chief medical and science officer has left his position after just 3 months on the job. Dr. Vinay Prasad led the center that oversees the regulation of vaccines, gene therapies, and other biologic drugs. He's faced criticism amid the controversy over the FDA's handling of Sarepta Therapeutics' Duchenne muscular dystrophy drug, Elevidys. The FDA halted shipments of that drug after the deaths of some recipients, but it removed the suspension earlier this week. In a statement, Health and Human Services said Dr. Prasad did not want to be a distraction to the great work of the FDA and the Trump administration and has decided to return to California and spend more time with his family. We thank him for his service and the many important reforms he was able to achieve in his time at the FDA. We're going to be speaking with FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary. We'll talk to him about this and a lot of other things that the FDA has been working on.
Tsunami waves hitting parts of the U.S. following one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. The 8.8 magnitude earthquake struck Russia's Far East. Earlier this morning, the National Weather Service said on X that waves had reached the California coast, and waves of nearly 6 feet were recorded in Hawaii. The alert level there downgraded to a tsunami advisory. That's just about an hour ago. No substantial damage has been reported, though authorities in Russia and Japan said several people were injured. And before I had gone to bed last night, the president had put out a post warning folks in Hawaii to be careful. And it was, I think it's been a tough 10 hours.
It's a big deal. Jane Wells is there, former reporter at CNBC. Yep. She filed a report kind of suggesting that all of them got out of there, and everybody's listening because of what happened in Lahaina. My daughter has friends who are there, and they all moved to higher ground as well. Everybody wants to take this pretty seriously. And the initial waves have not been bad as the worst case scenario, but
it's all the Oprah
mess
stuff.
Around with it.
The Oprah stuff, right?
No.
She bought up half of Maui, and there was a private road, her road, that was closed and people weren't able to evacuate, but then it was open later. But the usual suspects are crowing about that.
Right now, for the latest on this week's U.S.-China trade talks, Eamon Javers. He's in Stockholm, Sweden, with more on his conversation with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. And Eamon, this was pretty interesting yesterday. You managed to get some pretty significant news from the Treasury Secretary about what actually happened yesterday.
Yeah, Becky, that's right. We sat down with the Treasury Secretary just after he got off the phone with President Trump, briefing the president on the state of talks here in Stockholm with the Chinese side over 2 days. The bottom line is that they did not come to a deal, at least yet, right? The Treasury Secretary said he's got to go back to Washington today to meet in the Oval Office with President Trump. And President Trump will be the one who decides on that key threshold, which is whether or not to push back that August 12th deadline for Chinese trade negotiations. If he doesn't do that, those tariffs will snap back, the Treasury Secretary said. But if he does, we could look at another 90-day truce period where they simply set up another negotiation somewhere else in the world, possibly Portugal, the Treasury Secretary suggested yesterday. So we'll see through the day today what the president decides to do. The Treasury Secretary also told me that he pushed the Chinese side on their purchases of Iranian oil. The U.S. doesn't want the Chinese to continue doing that. I asked him what the Chinese response was to that pressure, and here's what he said.
They said they're a sovereign nation and that they have security needs, energy needs, and that it would be based on their internal policies. We have sanctioned what are called teapot refineries. They are private refineries, not state-owned. And so we have sanctioned those refineries, the owners, and some of those owners may have assets in the U.S.
Now, I also asked the Treasury Secretary about that EU deal earlier in the week that was agreed to on Sunday. One of the pieces of that deal was that the Europeans would purchase $600 billion worth of product from the United States. But after the deal was announced, the Europeans came out and said, well, actually, those product purchases are going to come from private European companies, and we as the government can't really guarantee that those companies will do that. So I asked the Treasury Secretary if the U.S. side feels that that $600 billion commitment is real. Here's what he said.
I think that's going to be closely monitored. I think President Trump believes that this is a good deal. I mean, on paper, this is a deal of the century, and I would be surprised over time if the EU doesn't hold up their end of the bargain, or the 15% tariff rate could change.
So, Becky, not a whole lot of specifics coming out of this sit down here in Stockholm. I asked the Treasury Secretary, is there any specific agreement that you guys came to with the Chinese side? He didn't really point to anything specific, but he said that the rhythm and tone of the negotiations is good. They're beginning to find a rapport with the Chinese side, and they're beginning to set sort of a framework for these talks. He kept talking about the arc of the negotiations. So this is setting up to be a long one indeed, Becky. And maybe what we're looking at now is a series of 90 days 30-day extensions until at some point Xi Jinping and Donald Trump can sit down in the same room and finalize a grander bargain between these two countries. At this session, though, the Treasury Secretary told me there was no conversation about a Xi Jinping-Donald Trump meeting anytime soon, guys. Back over to you.
Although the speculation is that could happen as early as October, Eamon.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the speculation, and a lot of folks thought that this would be teeing up that, but the Treasury Secretary said no discussion of that here, at least in this context.
Eamon, when you asked the Treasury Secretary about some of the things like Iranian oil, and his answer was, well, they said that they're a sovereign nation, basically, like we'll make our own decisions on that.
Right.
That's the headlines on it, but it does feel like there is progress being made. I mean, it sounds like it between the lines. As you said, there's nothing concrete you can point to, but it feels like things are moving that direction from everything we read and hear.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the body language was very positive. The Treasury Secretary was in a great mood. He was, joshing around with our crew and everything as we were setting up the cameras and the chairs and all of that in a back room at a Swedish government building here. So he was in high spirits. If I was a betting person, Becky, I would guess that the president will do that extension later today after he meets with Bessent. I would imagine that would be Bessent's recommendation to him. But, these things are unpredictable and you can never say for sure. But I don't think it's in nobody's interest right now for those tariffs to snap back right now. I also asked the Treasury Secretary, by the way, about Friday's deadline. Remember, August 1st is the deadline for all the tariffs on all the other countries around the world who haven't come to a deal with the U.S. so far. All those tariffs will snap back. The Treasury Secretary, I asked him what his message to American business is on those tariffs, and he said, well, look, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if those tariffs snap back, at least for a period of time.
Yeah, meaning that maybe just days or weeks before another negotiation can be kind of carried out?
I think the idea is that those countries would then be under pressure to negotiate.
Right. It seemed like his message, though, was to try and not have the markets freak out if those snap back.
Right.
Kind of the idea that this would be a temporary thing.
That's one of any Treasury Secretary's major jobs, right, is to manage market freakouts and sort of telegraph a little bit what's coming. And I think he was sort of giving a soft warning to markets that we may see that big snapback on Friday.
It's funny, there's a lot of different ways you can sort of parse the details of the deal. Yesterday, Eamon, the Wall Street Journal's criticism of crowing about the $600 billion in energy deal was that was already in the works. That Europe had already decided it was going to wean itself from Russia, and they were going to do $600 billion easy. So, so that was a way of saying, it's not a big deal because they're already going to do it. Now the question mark is whether they are going to do it. So I guess if it's economically in their interest to do it, they'll end up doing it, whether it's whether there are some implied threats or whether it's part of the deal or not. They may be just headed to that just from the economics of the energy needs that Europe has.
Yeah, and look, that's a big criticism of a lot of the corporate announcements as well, when the president will bring in CEOs who announce we're going to, open a major factory or something like that. People will say, well, that company was going to do that anyway, and they're just trying to get political points for doing the thing that they were going to do in their economic interest, no matter what. And you can't really separate the chicken and egg there, right? I mean, how much of this is, inspired by the new economic conditions created by the president? How much of this was happening anyway, and people are just trying to give the president some credit and get a photo op out of it? There's probably a mix of both of those in there, but the administration is, key to take credit when they can, as any administration would be.
Yeah, that's one of the great questions, chicken and an egg. And as far as I know, it still has not. We don't know. We may never know which came first.
I mean, the top scientists have been working on it for generations. Generations. They haven't come up with an answer.
No. And we're not going to. Eamon, thank you. Do you have a strong feeling?
It had to be a chicken who sat on the
You always come up with that, but it had to be. But then, I don't know. It's kind of like the sound of one hand.
It's an age-old one. We're not going to answer
it's the sound of one hand clapping.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary on what's changing at the FDA under his watch.
You can't possibly do a randomized controlled trial and have these rigorous standards when you have 50 or 100 people in the world that have a rare condition. And we've got to have regulatory flexibility. So we are working on a new pathway called the plausible mechanism pathway, by which we may not even need to see a study.
Plus, what's staying the same?
To be clear, there were no reductions in force or layoffs of scientific reviewers or of inspectors at the FDA.
There have been some who have left voluntarily after the departure of Peter Marks.
We'll be right back. This is Squawk Pod from CNBC. I'm producer Katie Kramer. Last night, the night before, the FDA commissioner was set to join us here on Squawk Box. The agency announced the resignation of its chief medical and scientific officer, who was also the head of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, the body overseeing vaccines and biologic medicines. Dr. Vinay Prasad was a controversial figure during his 3 months on the job, including his position on a Sarepta Therapeutics gene therapy that treats Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Dr. Prasad argued against continuing use of that drug when patients in a clinical trial died and oversaw a recent halt of its shipments. Then came the backlash. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board called the FDA's decision to ask Sarepta to halt sales of the therapy a, quote, mugging that would chill investment in innovation. Just 2 days ago, the FDA reversed course and okayed the continuation of Sarepta's drug shipments. And then Dr. Prasad announced his departure. Now, let's get back to Becky, Joe, and Andrew. Becky kicks things off.
FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary is in New York City today on a listening tour. He's going to be meeting with CEOs of major pharma and biotech companies. Dr. Makary joins us on set before he does that, and welcome. It's great to see you.
Great to be with you all.
So let's talk a little bit, first of all, why you're here in New York City. Who are you going to be speaking to? What's the point? Or I guess listening, not speaking.
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of things we need to do at the FDA. And so to inform us, we want to meet with executives, with pharma leaders, and we want to hear from them because I believe in listening, and we got to understand where in the user interface is the system broken. We're trying to ask the big questions. Why does it take over 10 years for a drug to come to market? Why do we have idle steps in the entire approval process? Do we really think if you have the cure for breast cancer, there should be long waiting periods where the application is sitting on a desk? Why do we have people apply after every phase, preclinical, IND, phase 1, phase 2? Can we run more continuous trials? So when we listen to the CEOs, we learn so much. Like one of the big pieces of feedback that's come up in the other 4 CEO listening sessions has been communication. If they can have a couple 15-minute calls with the scientific team, that can save them a year of guesswork. Yeah. So we don't want the FDA to be a black box. That's why we're releasing all of our decision letters so people can see exactly how the review team thinks. Because markets want predictability, and the companies want predictability, and the drug makers and scientists want to know how to design drugs knowing what the review team is going to think.
I think that's so important, and it's definitely something we hear from industry as well. There have been some concerns in the last month, though, about the complete response letters that were issued for 2 drugs, Replimune and Capricor. Both those companies said that they were caught off guard, that it seemed like things were changing. Standards were changing at the FDA. They thought they were following the guidance they were given. Can you explain what happened there and maybe how that gets fixed?
So I can't discuss any individual product or individual decision of the FDA, but look, the process should be transparent, and it's not always perfect. Sometimes the reviewers act in their own sort of autonomy and independence. We're trying to create more standardization and create a culture where we have common standards. For example, sometimes we still require routine animal testing when a drug's already been approved in humans and used in thousands of people in Europe. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Because that slows down the process
That slows down the process. We want to speed up the process, streamline it, modernize it. We're using AI now in our scientific reviews as an organizing tool. And these applications are gnarly. They're like, can be 100,000 pages. So we're going to introduce a radical concept called a page limit, just like college applicants have. And we want to allow drug makers to get more predictability and insight.
I think about the way the private sector does things and the way the government does things. And I think about DMV or take your pick. And I'm just wondering, does the FDA need more money? Is that always the answer? I think public schools, money keeps coming in, doesn't make it better. How do you private sectorize the FDA to do more, all the things you're talking about, streamline it, but without just throwing money at it? And you know how bureaucracies work. They don't.
Yeah, and every time there's a problem in government, the answer is always the same. More money, more authority, more people.
But there is criticism that you don't have enough right now.
So there's always going to be that criticism. My job is to do an assessment. And look, I came in right after a reduction in force. And so my job is to make sure that all the scientists and inspectors, and we have about 300 law enforcement officials with guns that go around and check out things like vape stores in our ports to make sure we're safe. We got to make sure everyone has all the resources. To be clear, there were no reductions in force or layoffs of scientific reviewers or of inspectors at the FDA.
There have been some who have left voluntarily after the departure of Peter Marks. And there's been some pushback from industry that says, wait a second, these were the people who were helping us streamline the process before. Now what?
Yeah, so look, I think the FDA does not rest on any one individual, and no one person makes or breaks a scientific division. There's over 1,000 scientists in that division. I've met with the leadership, the team. They're phenomenal. They're going to be strong. The FDA is going to meet all of its targets for reviewed decisions this year. I think we're going to reduce the average time. We may hit a record number of approvals this year. And so the trains are running on time. The FDA is strong, and it's going to continue to be strong. It's one of the greatest brands in the world. So we have a lot to live up to. And you see the pride in the institution. Doesn't matter what political party's in power. You see a tremendous pride among the scientists there.
There was big news just last night with the departure of Dr. Vinay Prasad. He had been there as the director of the FDA's Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. He was only there for 3 months. There was a lot that had happened, I would say, just over the last 3 or 4 days where he took some incoming, not the least of which was from the Wall Street Journal in an op-ed that they put out just saying that he was stopping innovation. He was opposed to some of these things. What can you tell us about that? Yeah,
the irony about that Wall Street Journal piece is that some of the drugs they criticized him for were not even in his center. He had nothing to do with them. And he did a tremendous amount of implementation of new policies in the time that he was at the FDA. I think the guy's a genius. He's published 550 scientific peer-reviewed studies in his career. He's 42 years old. So he gave us some of his time. Look, he's got family in California. The commute was brutal. And then when he saw some of these sort of smear pieces, he didn't want to be a distraction. So we're going to continue to talk to him. But we've got tremendous leadership there. Our top drug regulator, by the way, was not that role. Our top drug regulator is filled by this new guy, George Tidmarsh, MD, PhD, double fellowship trained in neonatology and oncology, and led La Jolla Therapeutics. So he is a drug developer himself. I think 7 different drugs he developed himself. He knows the FDA from both sides, and he's an academic with impeccable credentials from Stanford.
What will happen? Who's going to be coming in to replace Dr. Prasad?
So, look, we have a lot of interest from talented people, so we'll take a look at that interest. But we've got George Tidmarsh right now that sits as our top drug regulator.
Dr. Makary, part of this was, there's been so much focus on Sarepta, and it's something we watch closely because the stock was so massively impacted. But it was big news in the rare disease world as well, because this was a gene therapy that the FDA asked them to pull after there were 2 deaths with non-ambulatory patients from Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. They were pulling it from the non-ambulatory people, the boys who were further along in that disease and maybe more fragile. The FDA asked them to pull it from the ambulatory boys as well. And that was where the company pushed back and the families pushed back and said, wait a second, this is the only drug we have to fight a disease that is definitely killing our children.
Yes.
What happened? I know that the FDA has reversed course.
Yeah, so that was a very temporary hold on the ambulatory population, which has since been restored. The scientists at the FDA wanted to look at that safety signal after some deaths. So I stood behind them. I think the company is pleased with where things are. I can't discuss really any details of our conversations, but we are committed to that rare disease community because you can't possibly do a randomized controlled trial and have these rigorous standards when you have 50 or 100 people in the world that have a rare condition. And we've got to have regulatory flexibility. So we are working on a new pathway called the plausible mechanism pathway, by which we may not even need to see a study. We may just need to see a plausible mechanism and computational modeling suggesting that something is a safe molecule. And so you kind of saw that with the baby KJ example at University of Pennsylvania, in gene editing in newborn.
That was just earlier this year, a few months ago.
Yeah, so I think that was a great moment for the FDA.
Doctor, let's say that we see another a powerful variant of COVID, or even, hopefully, God forbid, a new novel pathogen. Messenger RNA technology can be upgraded. You can do it very quickly, and you can come out with something that it could probably, in my view, I think it saved our bacon to some extent last time. Are you comfortable with that technology if there's another pathogen that needs to be dealt with in the future? Would we use it?
You know, I think our job at the FDA and our charge by Congress is to review an application and then determine whether or not the data allows
Or do you think the technology is safe?
I think it can be. And look, safe is a relative term, right? Because there are risks, and there are risks of the disease.
Right.
A lot of people say they've been vaccine injured. That's not been appropriately studied. We did approve an mRNA vaccine in high-risk populations for COVID just recently.
Okay.
And we do have a traditional vaccine with Novavax that we also approved for COVID.
It's a different usage for cancer vaccines, but messenger RNA is a powerful technology. It's not monolithic, obviously.
Yeah, it can be. Look, in my entire medical career, we've heard this is going to be the future. It's going to be this or this, or and so there are a lot of different ideas.
Can I ask you, is anybody doing what you would describe as reasonable studies with reasonable, or that you would accept vaccine damage reports? You just described this idea of vaccine damage.
Vaccine injury. Right?
Vaccine injury.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is anybody doing any meaningful studies that you've seen on that actual topic?
Yeah. So the HHS and the NIH are starting to look at that because hundreds of thousands of Americans have described vaccine injury. I personally know of some cases. I know of one friend who lost a parent from the COVID vaccine. I'm not saying that's a contraindication. I'm just saying there were some complications, right. And when you blow them off entirely and say, look, it's 100% safe and effective, you alienate part of the public.
But you can rule out certain things. I mean, spike proteins don't last forever. Messenger RNA doesn't. Can we say definitively it isn't reverse transcribed into your genome? It doesn't last. The half-life is very quick. It's not around for a long time. Do spike proteins? Can't we do a study to rule out some of the conspiracy theories about it?
Yeah, and I think the bigger question is, what is the clinical outcome? You can find trace amounts of things, of almost anything. Newborn today will have almost 200 synthetic molecules in their umbilical cord, right? These are from the environment. They call them forever molecules. And by the way, we're very interested in environmental health and chemicals in the food supply. It's a big priority in this administration. But yeah, we could benefit from some better studies. I think people think that we at the FDA commission our own studies. We don't. We review applications and we try to make determinations to the best of our ability. And we're trying to get rid of the idle time. Why do we do these studies where we sit around and wait for the clinical endpoints and then submit a gigantic application with manufacturing information? We can use that idle time to review the manufacturing application data before we get the final endpoints, and then get the final endpoints as a supplement and make a decision in a month instead of a year.
But for example, what do you make of the measles outbreak that's taking place in this country?
Yeah, so I think you were on vacation when I came on last time. We talked about measles for maybe
a long time.
For a long time.
I'll leave it alone.
He gets a lot of time off. I don't know, but your agent is like a god.
The best way to prevent measles is through vaccination.
There you go.
That's a square answer.
Yeah.
Right. That's a clear answer.
You didn't need to be here for that. Yeah.
Marty, something else you've been focused on is what's happening with kratom and opioids. And what is it that you're cracking down on? You just announced this yesterday. You're going after a synthetic version of it?
Yeah, so look, public health is slow to respond with tobacco and cigarettes, with heroin, cocaine, opioids. we don't want to get caught flat-footed again. There's a product that's a synthetic product in the vape stores that are popping up on every corner in America. And we want to educate people about that product. It's called 7-OH. It has many other names. Sometimes it has the name 7-Omega or 7-metragenine. And it is a synthetic byproduct of the kratom plant. And the compounds in the kratom plant, which, by the way, is not our focus, but the concentrated synthetic byproduct called 7-OH is an opioid, and it binds to the mu receptor, the opioid receptor, 13 times more potently. And so you can actually walk down to some vape stores in America and buy an opioid, and we are concerned. We're hearing stories of addiction since our announcement yesterday. I got a flood of communications about, gosh, we lost our son to this 7-OH product. So we don't want to get caught flat-footed. We have a huge.
It's for sale now?
It's for sale, and oftentimes you just walk in there and buy it. And by the way, 85% of the vape products in these stores are illegal. They're Chinese products. They're banned overseas. So we've got to clean this up.
Yeah, shut them down altogether.
We're going to have a big action coming out, and so we've released a big report on 7-OH. We want to educate school boards and parents to talk to their kids about it.
Kratom itself is illegal in 33 countries. Why not focus on that as well?
So it's important to distinguish the lexicon here. So the kratom plant, which has been used in teas and other substances for centuries, may have some minimal health concerns, but it's not our focus. It's a synthetic concentrated byproduct that is stronger than oxycodone. That's where we're going to focus, and that's where I think we can distinguish where the real public health harm is. When you go really broad and say, look, everything is your brain on drugs, you're not really appropriately risk stratifying to parents who should know that this 7-OH product can be deadly.
Doctor, this is related. Obviously, it's public health, but the EPA is going to rescind, or moving to rescind this endangerment finding on carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. That basically saying that trace CO2 is not a danger to public health. I mean, you had to connect quite a few dots with some questionable science to get to the point where, I mean, it doesn't cause smog, it's odorless, it's colorless, it's trace, we exhale 10 times the amount. They're going to do this. Is that a danger to public health if the EPA and Lee Zeldin are able to do this, in your view?
You know, to be honest, I don't know enough about that issue.
You're in charge of our public health. Can you look into it for us?
So it's really an EPA issue. But look, there's a lot of things where we may just need better research. We have never talked about environmental exposures that may, say, cause cancer. We only talk about the chemo to treat it. I'm not saying it's CO2.
No, there are horrible pollutants in the air, believe me. I'm not saying that there aren't. I'm just saying that not all pollutants are created equal.
Yeah, because we exhale it.
It's absurd. But,
right.
Yeah.
Dr. Makary, I want to thank you very much for joining us again. Dr. Marty Makary is the head of the FDA.
Great to be with you guys.
Thanks. Nice to see you.
Next on Squawk Pod, how geopolitics are playing out in the travel industry with Booking Holdings CEO Glenn Fogel.
In Europe, Europeans not come to the U.S., but we see Europeans are going to Asia, or perhaps they're traveling within Europe. We still get that business. The American hotelier does not get that business.
America's tourism economy, as seen by the operator of global travel brands Kayak, Agoda, and Priceline, right after this. Welcome back to Squawk Pod.
Up and Andrew, Q.
You're watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin along with Joe Kernen and Becky Quick. Booking Holdings beating second quarter profit and revenue estimates. International booking strengthening at the Priceline and Kayak parent helped offset weaker travel spending in the U.S. Joining us right now, Glenn Fogel, Booking Holdings CEO. Good morning to you. Is the YOLO economy continuing, Glenn? Is that what these earnings are suggesting?
Well, good morning, Andrew, and thanks for having me. And certainly we are very pleased with the second quarter numbers. Did show a lot of people still traveling. I think that's just the fact of life nowadays. People like to travel and they're going to spend their money that way. So even in areas where perhaps there is softness in the economy, people still are prioritizing going traveling.
So there is an issue, though, of folks coming to the U.S., something you actually pointed to a couple months ago when we talked. What's going on there?
Hasn't really changed, unfortunately. We still have an incredible deficit in terms of people outside the U.S. coming to visit us here. It's really sad because when you look at us compared to 2019, we are still below the number of people who came and visited in 2019. And that's bad for the hotel industry in the U.S. It's bad for the employees. It's not good.
And how much do you think that's a function of economic weakness in these other countries? How much do you think this is some kind of political statement? And can you identify where or certain countries where that used to come to the U.S. that may not be right now and what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's a factor. It's many factors. Look, obviously we see Canada, U.S. way down, but Canadians are still traveling. We see them going to Mexico. So for our business, because we're so global, we're still getting the business. But the people in the U.S. who work in the hotels, they're not getting those Canadian visitors. And we'll see it in Europe. Europeans not come to the U.S., but we see Europeans are going to Asia, or perhaps they're traveling within Europe. We still get that business. The American hotelier does not get that business. Now, why? Well, it certainly can't be because the dollar is so strong so people can't afford it. That's not it. As we know, U.S. dollar has decreased, making it cheaper for a foreigner to come visit. So I have to say it probably is some of the elements that we see in the geopolitical area where people are saying, I'm not sure I want to go to the U.S. right now. Maybe I'm going to have a problem, immigration, passport control. And one thing that's really big is going into the U.S., if you are a non-U.S. citizen, you can have a really long line to get through that passport control. You go back home, you tell your friends, I went to the U.S., it was a wonderful place to visit, but it took me 3 hours at JFK. That's not conducive to increasing the number of people who are going to come visit us.
Can I ask you, Glenn, do you spend any time talking to folks in Washington about that particular issue?
I spoke with Secretary Duffy about that, as did many others. We've talked to people at Homeland Security about this. We've talked to people at State Department controls immigration. All these issues, it's throughout. Everybody gets it. The administration understands this. They're putting money in. The new bill is going to help improve the situation. And it's really important because we have two really big tourist things coming. We got World Cup coming to the U.S. We got the Olympics coming to the U.S. We want to make sure that people are able to come here, be able to visit and have a great time, spend their money here. It'd be great. We obviously want to get a big piece of this. And so we have an incentive to help improve it.
And I would imagine you can maybe explain the math, but for every dollar spent on an additional TSA agent, for example, that lets folks get through that line quicker, that there's a force multiplier in terms of economic impact.
Oh, no, absolutely true. And the fact is, so many people say, look, I'll pay an extra $25. I'm spending thousands to come visit. I'll spend $25. I'll spend $50 if I don't have to wait so long. But the problem is, and speaking with the secretary about this and other people about this, part of the issue, though, is actually the physical amount of space you have in these airports. You can only put so many booths to get people through to check their passports. So there's a physical issue, too.
In terms of just looking at the strength of the customer around the world, irrespective of sort of where they're traveling, are you seeing any trends in terms of people going sort of looking at lower end hotels that might have been looking at higher end hotels before, or downgrading in terms of what's happening in terms of airfares going from economy plus to regular economy, or by the way, the opposite, which would be even a more pleasant surprise?
Yeah, you're definitely getting to see a two-speed type economy around the world almost, but particularly in the U.S., where you see the lower end having a little more difficulty. So you see more softness in the 2-star hotel, the 3-star hotel. You see back of the cabin of the plane, a little bit more trouble there. Whereas people who are doing well in their terms of their own personal economy, they're still spending a lot of money. And for us, obviously, we want everybody to travel, everybody, no matter how much money we want them to go. But for our business, for example, we see over 30% of our customers are what we call genius levels 2 and 3. Those are frequent travelers. And those people are producing mid 50% of our Booking.com accommodation. So we're not as impacted as perhaps an airline might be.
Glenn, let me ask you a different question about the business itself and to the extent that there's a moat around your business, how you think about AI impacting that. And let me just lay out a situation for you. It seems to me that one of the things you've done so very well is develop relationships, contracted relationships, APIs, and all sorts of other things with all sorts of airlines and hotel companies and the whole thing, so you can actually, soup to nuts, really create an easy on-ramp for the customer. And that's been a great thing. My question is, in an age where, OpenAI and its new operator or agent service or some of the others that are doing similar things, whether one day they too will be able to actually make reservations directly with the hotels or directly with the airlines, effectively going and not even needing what's called an API, meaning that literally the service, the AI will literally just go to those websites on their own and be able to almost, reverse engineer what you've created without needing to have those relationships.
Yeah, I'm smiling, Andrew, a little bit because, of course, we hear this many times. And one of the great things is establishing relationships. So, for example, you happen to mention OpenAI. And of course, we are very proud to have been one of the founding partners with them in their operator mode. And if you saw their most recent thing, the agent mode, and I don't know if you saw their introductory video that Sam Altman led off, but if you look at that, you'll see it's booking.com that's doing the hotel booking there, which is just wonderful. And look, we have relationships with Microsoft. We're doing with Amazon and Alexa. We're talking with all the people in this area to create this. We provide a very specialized, very complex, very hard to do business. They do a very hard business themselves in terms of these large language models. Together, we can create something great for the consumer and great for the partners. We're going to continue to work together. I've heard this thing that you're going to get disintermediated for the 25 years I've been here at this company. And it's funny, I've heard it when Google was coming out. I heard it, the hotels are getting their own websites. You heard it all the time about AI. We have great AI that we're doing working together. During the time I've been here, the 25 years that I keep hearing how you're going to get disintermediated, our stock has gone up from when I first joined. Our low point, $6 a share. Currently, we're getting closer and closer to 6,000. Make the math simple. If we get to 6,000, that'd be a thousand times increase over the 25 years. Technology has changed tremendously over the 25 years, and it will continue to change, and we will continue to change with it.
Glenn, want to thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Hope you don't get disintermediated. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
That's the pod for today. Thanks for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern to get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show right into your ears. Please follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. That's it. Have a great Wednesday. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.